Today I'd like to explore joy and the path to happiness. One of the interesting principles of the Buddhist approach to life is with regard to enemies. Of course, we have the famous Christian teaching. Jesus says to love our enemies and to do good to those who try to harm us. Buddhism has a similar take in terms of enemies because a lot of times we think of our enemies and we think of the hatred we feel towards them, the discomfort they've caused us, the attacks on us, and we get a lot of agita in our bodies and in our spirits when we think of enemies. But the Buddhist, similar to the Christian take on enemies, is that enemies are our most precious spiritual teachers. It was very interesting. If you want to learn the path of spirituality, if you want to grow in your spiritual life, if you want to become a more spiritual person, where should you turn? Of course, we always think we should turn to prayer. We think we should turn to the scriptures. In our Christian tradition, we turn to our sacraments. We turn to great spiritual teachers, spiritual writers who have helped us. All of that, of course, very beneficial spiritually. But in Buddhism, one of the principal ways we grow in our spiritual life is to realize that our enemies are actually our teachers. Interesting. Our enemies can be our teachers. We can learn about spirituality through a contemplation of and a pondering of those people who are our enemies, those who maybe attack us, those who disagree with us, those who maybe have a different political point of view than we do. We can learn from them. So in Buddhism, we would be encouraged to take time to study our enemies, to study why they are enemies, to study our attitudes towards them, and to try and grow spiritually from how they attack us, how they treat us. One of the great examples of that in practical lived reality, the example of Anthony Ray Hinton. Anthony Ray was jailed unjustly for 30 years. Can you imagine being in a prison for a crime you did not commit for 30 years? And you know you didn't commit this crime. In Hinton's case, he wasn't even there when the crime was committed. He was falsely accused. And the jury believed the false testimony. And there was contrary evidence that was only brought out and discovered later on that the authorities did not make known to the defense team. And the defense team was initially very inadequate to begin with. So in his case, there he is. He's sitting in jail for 30 years of his life. Ooh. Imagine being separated from your family, from those you love, for that length of time. Horrible. So, what did Anthony Ray say about that experience? He said something that very similar to what the Buddhist would say. He said, if I am angry and unforgiving, they will have taken the rest of my life. You know, they already took 30 years. Am I going to be angry at that? Am I going to be unforgiving of those authorities who really acted terribly in his case, very unjustly and unfairly. Should I be angry at that? Should I be unforgiving? A lot of us would say, yes, try to get revenge on them, do something. Can you beat them up? Get that anger out. No, no. If I am angry, if I am unforgiving, what's going to happen? I will just be in jail again. They will literally imprison me. We learn from our enemies. This is how we grow spiritually. We would look at that and say, in Anthony Ray's case, who was the spiritual person? It wasn't the lower authorities who put him in prison. It wasn't the witnesses who testified falsely. It was Anthony Ray himself, by his attitude of learning from his enemies. The brother David Steindl Rast, we have spoken about previously, who has written a lot about gratitude, has a saying about joy in terms of happiness. It says, joy is the happiness that does not depend on what happens. Seems contradictory, right? Joy is the happiness, but it doesn't depend on what happens. So I'm not going to receive joy or not receive joy based on what happens. So you might ask, well, how then can I be a person of joy if it doesn't depend on what happens? I mean, good things happen to me, I'm going to be joyful. Bad things happen, I'm going to be sad. That's the normal human reaction. But David says no. Let's look at this deeper. He says, joy is the grateful response to the opportunity that life offers you at this moment. So each moment of our lives, we are offered an opportunity. There is something that is going to come our way. And joy is the grateful response to that. It might be something very good. It might be something very bad. But our response is one of gratitude, of looking at that circumstance, saying, this is an opportunity. Maybe it's an opportunity to learn something from a bad circumstance, from an unfortunate happening, as Anthony Ray Hinton did. He learned how to be a better person, a more loving person, a more caring person. You might say, well, I don't want to be in jail for 30 years. I don't want that. None of us would want that. But presented with that opportunity in that present moment, Anthony Ray Hinton looked beyond that. And he saw goodness. And he found joy in the present moment. He didn't let his anger towards his captors, towards his false accusers, imprison him. Yes, he was in prison, but he was a free man. He experienced true joy in the present moment. His brother, Steindl Rast, would speak.